Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So Cyberstorm Access is almost legal, and with it we are definitely going to see a big shift in the format, as it makes Super Heavy Samurai, Pearly, and Gold Pride all extremely relevant. Now, even though we do have old decks like Kashtira and Runic Naturia and Sprite still being really strong right now, things could change after the next ban list, so you guys should be familiar with the new decks and how they function. So today we are going to go over a few cards that are currently trending on the market because of how they will impact the meta in just a couple of weeks. Let's get started. Alright, to start off with, we're going to talk about a card that we've actually covered a few times on Market Watch before. It is Power Filter. This is a really simple continuous spell card that prevents both players from special summoning monsters with 1000 or less attack points. So players right now are looking at siding this card in for the Pearly matchup, since the Pearly main deck monsters have very low attack points, and this card basically prevents them from special summoning anything out with their quick play spells. This is kind of interesting, because then in order to get monsters onto the field, they would have to normal summon a main deck monster and then find a line of extra deck monsters that have more than 1000 attack points to try to actually play the game. Now, in the past, we've talked about this card, and it was potentially useful a couple of times over the last few years, but honestly, I don't think that this card has ever really seen any sort of competitive success. It's usually just a case of there generally being better options that you can choose to run in place of this card that might have more applications against a wider variety of matchups. Obviously, the format hasn't taken shape yet, so we don't know if this card is going to be necessary for the next format because of how good Pearly might be, but I'm leaning towards it not being that amazing because I do feel like there are just better cards overall that you could side against Pearly anyways. However, this card was first talked about by Yassine, and I think that that's what kind of drew attention to the card, as people are unsure of what to pick up going into next format. Yassine's a really smart player, and I'm sure that he has looked into the format more than I have, so if he's saying that the card is good, I would at least make note of this. Now, as far as price goes, this card has two different printings that have spiked in price over the last couple of weeks. The supers are now up to $15 for a near mint copy, which is absolutely ridiculous, but then even then, we have the commons from a fairly recent OTS tournament pack that are up to $4 per copy, while they were only 50 cents a few weeks ago. Definitely, this is a card for you guys to dig up out of your bulk and maybe keep a set of aside for yourself just in case the card ends up being really good. However, at the same time, I would highly consider offloading any extra copies that you have based on this card's lack of performance in the past. Next up, we have Psyframe Lord Lambda. Lambda is another card that we've talked about a couple of times over the last few years, with it seeing varying amounts of play depending on the format. Naturally, the card sees more play when Gamma is good in any given format, provided that you're playing a deck that can put extra bodies on the field to make this card with. Now, going into next format, everyone is expecting Gamma to be an amazing card, not only because you can hit hand traps like Ash Blossom and Ghost Ogre, but also because you can hit Dimension Shifter and Droll Lockbird, two big hand traps with lingering effects that can effectively shut down your entire turn. Now, because of this, players want to be able to use Gamma at any point in time, so Lambda becomes a card that anyone using Gamma wants to have access to in their extra deck, especially considering how easy it is to make. It is a bit situational. Sometimes you don't have enough bodies to make the Lambda and still keep going, and sometimes you won't have access to Gamma at all because most of the time you have to hard draw it. But when the situation does come up, you will want to be able to go into Lambda to turn on your negate for the right time. Now, fortunately, Lambda did get a rare reprint in one of the maximum gold sets, and you can still grab that copy for well under $1. If you don't already have one, I would make sure that you get a copy or two for your own use, though I wouldn't expect it to go up very much in price from here either, so I wouldn't exactly invest in a ton of copies. As for the original secret rare copy, of course, it's the highest rarity printing of Lambda. The card has already gone up in price over the last few months, where it was down at around $8, and it's now basically double that at $15 each, lowest on TCG Player. I think that if you're running the Gamma package and you can afford the extra deck space, you should absolutely grab a copy of Lambda if possible, since you will really appreciate having the option there if you need it. I know I always seem to draw into Gamma after I have a couple of monsters on board, and if I'm not running Lambda, I always wish that I could just link the monsters off into Lambda, so keep an eye on this card as we wait and see how exactly the format shapes up. The next card we have is Clockwork Knight, which is one of the more obscure cards that have recently come out. This card is kind of just like a spell card version of DNA Surgery, but it just transforms all face-up monsters on the field into machines. It does have another effect where you can banish this card from your graveyard and discard a card to search for an Earth Machine monster, but that's really situational. I guess you could search something like Regulus, but You're not exactly going to be running Foolish Burial Goods to dump this card, so I don't really know. So when I first saw this card trending upwards, it was definitely confusing since I wasn't sure exactly where it could be useful. What I've been told is that this card can be activated, and then you special summon a Cyber Dragon, and you turn the entire field into a giant Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon. I don't know exactly if this is really what people are planning, but that specific line of play is like really specific. I can understand maybe just Cyber Dragon, since then against like super heavy samurais you could use just the Cyber Dragon to fuse away with like Platinum Gadget and Regulus, but there's still a lot of other monsters that you have to deal with, and even then, Naturia Exterio could just negate the Clockwork Knight. I'm not sure, siding Clockwork Knight and Cyber Dragon just to try and help clear a super heavy samurai board seems like a lot of work, when you could just play Dark Ruler No More or something like that and it would be much more efficient. Now that aside, I do understand that Clockwork Knight is going to be a bit more price sensitive, as it was a short printed card in Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge, but overall I'm definitely not yet really convinced. I'm sure that somewhere you'll be able to pull off some really niche combo with this card, but I don't think it's something that will see a ton of usage since this is an Edison format and Cyber Dragon isn't in everyone's deck anymore. If you guys do know if there's another reason for this card trending upwards so much, please let us all know down in the comment section, but for now, I'm definitely voting to stay away from this card. Don't pick it up and buy into the hype because it definitely seems like its application is extremely niche. Okay, so this is actually something that several people asked me for at regionals over this past weekend. It is Aratama. I think we talked about this card a little while ago. This is a spirit monster that searches for any spirit monster when it is normal summoned or flip face up. Now in Cyberstorm Access we have a new spirit monster coming out called Sakitama, which is a level 4 spirit monster that you can reveal in your hand to get an extra normal summon of a spirit monster for this turn. The idea is that you can run Aratama and Sakitama in any deck that looks to make a generic rank 4 monster, and this gives you a free rank 4 at the expense of your normal summon. I don't think it's anything too crazy or game breaking, but it can definitely help certain decks. Right now in the OCG, players are using this in MathMech, and I believe that for a while they were using it in Exo Sisters as well. Exo Sisters are a big waifu deck, so I'm sure that there are players who will want to try to run Exo Sisters again here in the TCG and take advantage of this little spirit package. As for Aratama, this is a card that only ever got a rare printing back in Shadow Specters, which came out almost a full 10 years ago. I know, it feels like it wasn't that long ago, to be honest. Because of this increase in demand for this card, Aratama is now up to a whole $8 per copy, which is actually quite a bit for something that was just a rare from a core set. It may be underwhelming, but this card was only $2 to $3 a few weeks ago, and it just recently shot up in price. So if you guys didn't dig this card up out of your bulk last time we talked about it, you'll definitely want to make note of it for now, and maybe even dig through the bulk bins at your locals to see if you can find a few extra copies. Alright, on to the next one, and it's a bit unexpected. We have Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid Neo Tempest Terahertz. This is a fairly new card that came out in Maze of Memories, and I think it's something that a lot of us probably overlooked. It's a Link 5 monster with 3000 attack points that requires 3 or more Cybers monsters to make. It has a few different effects. It negates your opponent's monster effect that activates in the battle phase. It lets you dump a Cybers card from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard to give this card 2500 attack points, and add the dumped card's attribute to this card, and it can also attack once for each attribute that it has. So right now over in the OCG, MathMech is a top tier strategy once again, as opening with MathMech Circular lets you build an entire field with multiple interruptions. The deck was good last year, catching a lot of players off guard, but fell off in the Ishizu tier limit format, as the shuffle back effects of Keldo and Mudora were really difficult for MathMech to put up with. Now, however, the deck is back to being top tier, and Terahertz is a really cool tool for the deck, especially with new extra deck cards that Terahertz can dump directly to the graveyard. So on the release of Maze of Memories, no one really thought that Terahertz would have any competitive relevance at all. The Ultras were only $1 or $2, and the Collector's Rare printing was one of the cheapest of the set at only $20 to $25. With the emergence of MathMech in the OCG, however, the Ultra Rares are now up to between $4 and $5 each, while the Collector's Rares are all the way up between $45 and $50. A very significant price jump, especially for such a brand new card, though of course we don't know for sure if this success in the OCG is going to translate here in the TCG. However, because we have seen MathMech do well in the TCG previously, and the deck still has access to all of the same tools now as it did before, I'm definitely expecting MathMech to be another really solid strategy going into this upcoming format. Alright, this is another card that might have gone a bit under the radar recently. It is Nadir Servant. So there was a time where Nadir Servant and the Dogmatica cards felt like they were being splashed into a ton of different decks. You could search for Ecclesia, which was a free special summon and search. You could dump a Garura or an Entis with Servant and get a free draw or a pup. And it didn't matter that it restricts you from special summoning from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, since you could just activate Nadir Servant at the end of your combo. I believe that the main thing we saw it in before was Invoke Dogmatica, where you would add a couple of interruptions to your Mechaba and whatever other fusions you could put out. Well, now the package is seeing play once again in Branded Despia, where you get to put out an extra Ecclesia and search for Fleur de Lis at the end of your combo. However, the deck gets added value from it because you can dump one of the branded fusion monsters with Nadir Servant from your extra deck and proc one of their effects to go off during the end phase. Overall, it seems just as strong of a card now as it was in that deck before as an engine that generates you a couple pieces of advantage with minimal downside. Now, with Branded Despia being one of the more viable decks this upcoming format, and with all of the new support that they seem to constantly be getting, a lot of players will be looking to pick up the cards in order to complete their decks. Nadir Servant has just 2 printings, the original secret rare from Rise of the Duelist, which is a crazy $48 right now, and then the ultra rare Megaton reprint, which isn't too high, it's just under the $10 mark. Now, I'm not too sure about what to do with this one. I could see this totally slipping under the radar since cards like Fleur de Lis and Ecclesia have each seen multiple reprints and this card just keeps on getting higher and higher. Alternatively, I could also see Konami reprinting this card in Battles of Legend to encourage players to continue looking at building Branded Despia. It all depends on what decks you guys are going to play this format, but if you guys are going to be sticking with Samurais or Pearly and staying away from Branded, you might want to move your copies of Nadir Servant while they are so expensive, just in case they do see that upcoming reprint. And finally, there's one last card for us to talk about. It is No Punk Deer Note. This is a level 5 Punk monster that is a key extender for the Punk strategy. You generally special summon this card out of the deck directly, and when it's sent from the field to the graveyard, which includes using it as a synchro material, you get to special summon a non-level 5 Punk monster from your graveyard. Pretty straightforward effect. This card is necessary for some of the combo lines because you can combine it with a level 3 tuner to make a level 8 synchro, and it replaces itself by getting you an additional body out of the graveyard as an extender, and if that's a level 3, you could potentially use that to go into the new Gold Pride Xyz monster. Now, of course, I don't know exactly how good Gold Pride is going to be. Yeah, the cards are pretty crazy, but it depends on the next ban list, and then also how good some of the existing strategies like Branded Despia, Kashtira, and Runic Naturia are, as well as how the new decks are going to impact the format in the form of like Pearly and Super Heavy Samurais. Now, generally, Deer Note is just a one-of, and Deer Note was just an ultra rare from Dimension Force. However, the card has gotten pretty pricey for an ultra rare that's just a one-of. The card was down at like $5 or $6, as punks haven't seen much usage recently, but now they're up to $9, and there are several copies on TCG Player that have been moving in the double digits. Now, given the fact that this card is just a one-of, I think you can keep a copy or even a set for yourself if you'd like to use it, but given the recent hype that this card has seen, I would definitely consider offloading it soon. It should be reprinted in the 2023 Megatons. However, you might want to wait at least until the ban list drops and see how much more hype the Gold Pride deck actually gets, in case that contributes to another price spike of some of the punk related cards. Okay guys, that is it for today's episode. I do feel like we're at a really big turning point for the game. There's some big changes that are going to take place between the ban list coming out and then Cyberstorm Access release this upcoming weekend. I'm really looking forward to see how the format changes and what new techs people are going to try. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today and what other cards are trending on the market. And if you haven't already, do make sure that you hit that subscribe button as well. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.